11th tropical storm of the 2025 Eastern Pacific hurricane season has appeared in the form of Tropical Storm Ivo, a newly formed, very fast-moving, has to be said, tropical storm off the coastline of Mexico with winds of 40 miles per hour. Now, Ivo is a newly formed tropical storm, and heavy rainfall is going to be the primary threat, with isolated heavy rainfall events taking place along the coastline of Mexico over the next 12 to 24 hours. So, it's got winds of 40 miles per hour, 65 kilometers per hour, and 1 minute sustained winds, pressure 1,008 millibars, moving west-northwest at 22 miles per hour. And good thing we are code unclassified on T-Coast for this storm right now, as there is a very little to no threat to land over the next few days. So if you're tracking it at home, it's located at 14.2 degrees north, and then 9.1 degrees west, which is 163 miles away from Manzanillo, 178 from Puerto Escondido, 189 from Acapulco, 285 for Zihuatero, my bad on the pronunciation of that, and 328 from Lázaro Cárdenas. That's 262, 286, 304, 459, and 528 in kilometers, respectively, for those locations. Going to be a very coastal riding storm, offshore though, has to be said, as it moves out towards the west-northwest. Very fast-moving, has to be said, for the average here along the coastline of Mexico. Normally you see storms moving quite a bit more slowly than this, but has to be said, no watches or warnings are in effect right now with the storm. We're not really going to be seeing too much in terms of watches or warnings, I don't think, over the next few days, as the storm is forecast to intensify, yes, but the wind radius is forecast to be relatively small over the next 12 to 24 hours, as the storm moves very quickly off towards the west-northwest. So the primary hazards as it stands right now is going to be rip currents, as per usual, and heavy rainfall. Of course, if you're visiting any beachy areas along the Pacific coastline of Mexico, be sure that you're up to date with the latest rip current threat and know the signs and hazards of rip currents. You know, if you get caught in this kind of things, they can be deadly, even for hurricanes thousands of miles away. So you can imagine one just a few hundred miles off the coastline. You can just imagine just how destructive that can potentially be. Of course, heavy rainfall threat is going to be a threat as well, with the storm being this close to land. You know, we might be seeing some rain up to 100 to 200 millimeters of rain. You know, that's always going to be possible with these kind of things. Not going to be really too bad of a flooding threat, I don't think so, as the storm is going to remain offshore. So here's our latest track forecast, which is virtually in agreement with the National Hurricane Center's forecast to become a Category 1 hurricane, peaking with winds of 80 miles per hour here on the afternoon of Friday into Saturday. Remains to be seen if it gets a little bit higher than that, though it has to be said, per the National Hurricane Center's forecast discussion, there is a spread about 30 knots or 40 or 35 miles per hour on either end of that. So it could be a mid-tropical storm, or it could also be anywhere up to a major hurricane. So we're going right in the middle, probably at a mid to low Cat 1, right about 80 miles per hour is probably the best one right now. And there's that latest forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center, doing a very quick and very thin cone over the next day and a half. But then it widens a little bit, you know. Where does it go beyond that? So one thing for certain, away from land, and it'll be weakening as we go into the early part of next week, and the story of Ivo will be coming to a close. And after Ivo, it looks like the Eastern Pacific is going to be quiet for a little bit. So after Henry and Ivo move out, it'll be quite a quiet time, hopefully. All estimates right now are in virtual agreement of a 40 mile per hour tropical storm. ASCAT did suggest 40 mile per hour winds earlier, maybe a little bit lower than that. We'll have to wait and see though on if we get another ASCAT pass soon, but it did get a very closely knit circulation. You know, it's not very spread out like it looks on imagery. It's very tightly clustered, that low level center of Ivo right now. So here's what the models are suggesting over the next few days. You can see them very closely knit for the next 24 to 36 hours, but then past that day 2 point, where does it go beyond there? So one thing's for certain, of course, away from land, but remains to be said, where does it go beyond that? You know, does it go a little bit further off towards the north and, you know, maybe touch those warmer waters for a little bit longer than the HWRF is suggesting, or maybe the HFS taking it a little bit off towards the north, and we can get a little bit more quickly. We'll need to monitor over the next few days. The intensity forecast is a little bit more uncertain. You know, does it become a hurricane? There's still that possibility that it might not become a hurricane. You know, it's going to be a very uncertain situation right now. You know, wind shear is a little bit high, but there might be some room for that wind shear to drop, and that could allow it to become a hurricane. We'll have to wait and see, though. You know, this storm has got 3 to 4 days to basically show us what it's made of as it moves off towards the west-northwest, thankfully far away from any land areas. But wow, Eastern Pacific are up to 11 named storms. The average for the 11th named storm, including the Central Pacific, by the way, is in mid-September. So we are well ahead of schedule. Water temperatures right now look to be pretty decent to support additional development. 29 to 30 degrees Celsius, maybe even a little bit warmer in some spots underneath the storm right now. So it's got plenty of water temperatures to work with. Those are going to fuel gentrification for about the next 3 days or so. But really past day 3, day 4, those are when those waters are going to take a nasty dive. You can't see it because they're just off screen towards the northwest here. But those water temperatures past really day 4 take a massive dive. You'll see it on the REM plot here in just a few seconds. Surface plots are really going to be saying too much, but there's like a island platform just towards the east of the storm, hitting maybe a pressure of 1,014 millibars. So yes, it is a very high pressure storm. You know, it's only just formed. You know, literally as I've narrated this, it's only formed in just the past hour. So it's not really going to be too much of surface observations that we're going to be seeing. You know, due to the fact that this storm is going to be remaining offshore. You know, that's common for the Pacific storms here. So here's what the red plot is saying. Model plots once again showing the storm pretty much going off towards the west-northwest. Tightly cluttered for the next day and a half, but maybe a little bit less of a spread towards day 3, day 4, and onwards. But by then, you know, the storm's going to be weakening, maybe down from a hurricane down to a tropical storm by that point. And it's going to be on the way out at that point, so not really too much to concern in terms of the top forecast past day 3, day 4 for land effects. The intensity forecast is still a little bit of a challenging one. You know, you have models like the GFS, the HAFS, only suggesting a tropical storm, and then you've got, you know, those models, looks to be the DSHB, no whatever that one is, and maybe one of the H models suggesting a hurricane. H should be representing a Category 2. Can't rule that out. Wind shear is going to be, I would say. It's at 15 knots right now, going down a little bit, but you see, it doesn't really get towards that 10 to 5 knot range that tropical cyclones really like to be in for rapid intensification. Not going to be down towards that. You have to wait and see on that, though. Interior temperatures are going to climb a little bit, actually, over the next 24 to 36 hours. Peaking at around maybe 24 hours from now, but then that drop, and then when you look past day 4 and day 5, 25 Celsius waters, and then down to 23 to 22 degrees Celsius by day 5. Really going to kill off this storm past that point. So satellite imagery saying that this storm it's got some organization to it. You can see it is trying to organize. It's doing its best under the face of that wind shear, 15 to 20 knots of wind shear right now. It's doing its best. You know, I've seen storms do worse in these kind of wind shear environments, especially in the Eastern Pacific. So it's trying its best. You know, it's got those cloud tops. Some of which are moving onshore and promoting that heavy rainfall threat. That's why we had that on a few slides just a few minutes ago. So of course, you know, that's one thing we got to watch out for, is that heavy rainfall threat. Visible imagery, you can very clearly see that there is somewhat of a low center underneath there. Very tightly compact though, per that ASCAP pass. Dry air isn't going to be too much of an issue over the next few days either. It is a fairly moist environment too here, as you see on the water vapor imagery. Much drier air off towards the east though, but that's moving away from the storm as the storm is moving up towards the west here. So a fairly moist environment is going to promote these thunderstorms to continue to blow up around the center of circulation over the next few days. And Tropical Storm Ivo should be allowed to intensify over the next few days as it moves off towards the west here. Thankfully, offshore of Mexico and over the open waters of the Eastern Pacific so far. Remains to be seen what Ivo will show us, but it's got some time.